I'm living in an endless dream. Our memories together form a winding stream. I look in your familiar eyes and watch the moon's reflections rise, while angels in the garden ingest the light with pulsing wings and timeless sight. The cool evening air moves through. These are my sunset days with you. We're walking on the cobblestones along the road that leads us home. You're laughing loud, your eyes agleam through the muted reds of autumn's dream. Vines, the compass needle bearing true. It always leads me back to you. You are my sun, you are my soul. You are my truth, you keep me whole. And hold me till the night is through. And make the daytime bright and new. So stay here in my endless dream, where our memories together form a winding stream.
30 seconds.
There's nothing that I'd rather do than spend my sunset days with you. Than spend my sunset days with you.
Sunset Days by Trey Anastasio. What a nice, beautiful way to start a Friday morning. Good morning, everybody. It is a blessing to see you. Thank you to all of you who have made it to the Friday morning meeting. I know that this is a little bit of a change. Some of us have been awake for quite some time, already getting busy in our COVID work day. Some of us are just getting up and stretching. Maybe you got a glass of orange juice next to you. Maybe you have a very good friend next to you. If you do, maybe take a look at them and go, hey, thanks for being here. It's nice to see you today. I am super grateful to everybody who is making it on this beautiful day. It's a little dark, I think, and so I might. You really are like trying to look at me while I read. That's fine. The only problem with this is that you can't quite see Mr. Gargoyle. You'll notice that he's over on the rock today. He decided to make a move and see if he could enjoy being with us. Good morning. It is great to see you. Mr. O, present and accounted for. I'm glad that you are too. I want to share that it has been an absolutely wonderful, wonderful week, filled with a lot of great support and filled with a lot of opportunities and sharing. I want to give some props. There have been a few people, Sean B. and Olympia, you keep doing your work. Thank you so much. Thanks for always taking the time to do something active while you're listening as well. That's really, really cool. The neat thing that I'm starting to see, Sean, in the way that your brain puts it together. So I'm really, really grateful for that. To those of you who just sit back and relax. Remember, we have a challenge for the weekend. One of those challenges is to find a very comfortable reading spot, or to make a really comfortable reading spot, something that is really special to you. A lot of people will have a tendency to find that special place maybe in the sun, or maybe just a little bit of sunlight close by. Some people will put pillows down, and some people will just lay on the floor and have that special spot. So if you can really support us in regards to it, just shine. Some people are saying that I'm a little choppy, so I'm going to kind of give a little bit of cross fingers. If this video comes out bad, I promise to make a new one. But to those of you who are here, I'm going to read and work. We've been having a little bit of problems today in regards to it for our morning stuff. So thank you, Caden, for noting that we might be a little bit choppy. So to follow up, Billy, our main character, has his dogs, Old Dan and Little Ann. His dad helped him yesterday to get a raccoon skin. Do you remember why? It had to do with training the hounds for the true hunt. My belief is that today we are going to have the grand adventure of being able to see the dogs on their first outing. My question today is, on their first outing, will the dogs and Billy be successful? Pay attention also today to when they go hunting. This is not something that I want you to sneak out your house and do. I want you to make sure that you always talk to your parents about going out. But pay attention to this 13-year-old and when he is going out, and whether or not you would feel comfortable doing that. I want to show you the cover because I kind of picture this as being a little bit of what the moment is going to be like. That they go off as the sun is setting. So without further ado, I'm going to hope that my computer allows us the opportunity to flow right into this story. Ladies and gentlemen, Where the Red Fern Grows, Chapter 8. The day hunting season opened, I was as nervous as Sammy, our house cat. Part of that seemingly endless day was spent getting things ready for the coming night. I cleaned my lantern and filled it full of oil. With hog lard, I greased my boots until they were as soft as a hummingbird's nest. I wonder what a hummingbird's nest is feeling like. I was grinding my axe when Papa came round. He smiled and he said, "It sure is, Papa," I said, "and I've waited a long time for it." Ooh, hold on a minute. It's saying that my space is choppy. I want to get just a moment. I'm sorry. Seems like it's coming back. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. I'm going to start that over. I apologize to anybody who's like, frustration. I'm doing the best I can, but I have no control over all the business that's going on over Wi-Fi. The day hunting season opened, I was as nervous as Sammy, our house cat. Part of that seemingly endless day was spending getting things ready for the coming night. I cleaned my lantern and filled it full of oil. With hog lard, I greased my boots until they were as soft as hummingbird's nest. I was grinding my axe when Papa finally came around the corner. He smiled as he said, "It's the big night, isn't it?" "Sure is, Papa," I said, "and I've waited a long time for tonight." "Yeah, I know," he said. "I've been thinking. There's not too much to do around here during the hunting season. I'm pretty sure I can take care of things, so you just go ahead and hunt all you want." "Thanks, Papa," I said. "I guess I'll be out pretty late at night, and I'll probably have to do a lot of sleeping in the daytime." Papa started frowning. "You know," he said, "your mother doesn't like this hunting of yours very much. She's worried about you being out all by yourself all night long." "I can't see why Mama has to worry," I said. "Haven't I been roaming these woods ever since I was big enough to walk? And I'm almost 14 now." "I know," said Papa. "It's all right with me, but women are a little different than men. Mamas are a lot different. They worry more. Now, Just to be on the safe side, I think it would be a good idea for you to tell us exactly where you be hunting. Then, if anything happens, we'll know where to look. I told him that I would, but I didn't think anything was going to happen. After Papa had left, I started thinking, he doesn't even talk to me like I was a boy anymore. It made me feel just about as big as our old red mule. I'm waiting. This wonderful thought made me feel just about as big as our old red mule. Similar. I had a good talk with my dogs. I've waited almost 3 years for this night, I said, and it hasn't been easy. I've taught you everything I know, and I want you to do your best. Little Ann acted like she understood. She whined and saved me a wash job all over my face. Old Dan may have, but he didn't act like it. He just lay there in the sunshine, all stretched out and limber as a rag. During supper, Mama asked me where I was going to go out and hunt. I'm not going far, I said. Just down on the river. I could tell Mama was worried, and it didn't make me feel too good. Billy, she said, you know I don't approve of this hunting, but it looks like I can't say no. Not after all you've been through, getting your dogs and all that training. Oh, he'll be all right, Papa said. Besides, he's getting to be a good-sized man now. Man, exclaimed Mama. Why, he's just a little boy. You can't keep him a little boy always, Papa said. He's got to grow up someday. I know, Mama said, but I don't like it. Not at all. And I can't help worrying. Mama, please don't worry about me, I said. I'll be all right. Why, I've been all over these hills. You know that. I know, she said. But that was in the daytime. I never worried too much when it was daylight. But at night, that's different. It'll be dark and anything could happen to you. There won't be anything happening, Mama, I said. I promise I'll be careful. Mama got up from the table saying, well, it's like I said. I can't say no and I can't help worrying. I'll pray every night that you're out there, Billy. The way Mama had me feeling, I didn't know whether to go hunting or not. Papa must have sensed how I felt. It's dark now, he said, and it's like, are they cooking something? Stirring. Coons start stirring. Oh, that must mean that they start getting going. Like they sleep during the day and they act out at night. I guess that's why you have to hunt for them at night. So, it's dark now, he said, and I understand those coons start stirring pretty early. You'd better be going, hadn't you? While Mama was bundling me up, Papa lit my lantern. He handed it to me, saying, I'd like to see a big coon skin on the smokehouse wall tomorrow morning. The whole family followed me out onto the porch. There, we all got a surprise. My dogs were sitting on the steps, waiting for me. I heard Papa laugh. Well, they know you're going hunting, he said. Know it as well as anything. Well, I never, said Mama. Do you really think they know? It does look like they do. Why, just look at them. Little Ann started wiggling and twisting. Old Dan trotted out to the gate, stopped, turned around, and looked at me like I was holding him up. Sure, they know Billy's going hunting, piped the little one. And I know why. How do you know so much, silly? I asked the oldest one. Because I told little Ann, that's why, she said. And she told old Dan. That's how they know. We all had a laugh at her. The last thing I heard as I left the house was a voice from my mother. Be careful, Billy, she said, and don't stay out too late. Listen to this setting. The boy is off with his 2 dogs, and he's leaving home. Mama's saying goodbye, the sisters are cheering him on, and Dad's standing there proud. Listen to how he feels. You can hear it in the way that he's writing. It was a beautiful night, still and frosty. A big grinning Ozark moon had the countryside bathed in a soft yellow glow. The starlit heaven reminded me of a large blue umbrella, outspread and with handles broken off. Just before the trail is going to be a little different tonight. Real Mr. Ringtail. So remember everything I taught you, and I'm dependent on you. Just put up one in a tree, and I get to do the rest. I turned them loose, saying, go get them. They streaked for the timber. By the time I had reached the river, every nerve in my body was drawn up as tight as a fiddle string. Big-eyed and with ears open, I walked on, stopping now and then to listen. The way I was slipping along, anyone would have thought I was trying to slip up on a coon myself. I had never seen a night so peaceful and still. All around me, tall sycamores gleamed like white streamers in the moonlight. A prowling skunk came wobbling up the riverbank. He stopped when he saw me. I smiled at the foxfire glow of his small, beady red eyes. He turned and disappeared into the underbrush. I heard a sharp snap and a feathery rustle in some brush close by. A small rodent started squealing in agony. A nighthawk found his supper. Across the river and from far back in the rugged mountains, I heard the baying of a hound. I wondered if it was the same one I had heard from my window on those nights so long ago. Although my eyes were seeing the wonders of the night, my ears were ever alert, listening for the sounds of my hounds telling me that they had found a trail. I was expecting one of them to bawl, but when it came, it startled me. The deep tones of old Dan's voice jarred the silence around me. I dropped my axe and almost dropped my lantern. A strange feeling came over me. I took a deep breath and threw back my head to give the call of a hunter. Whoo! But something went wrong. My throat felt like it had been tied in a knot. I swallowed a couple times and the knot finally disappeared. As loud as I could, I whooped, "Hoo-wee! Get him, Dan! Get him!" Little Ann came in, and the bell-like tones of her beautiful little voice made shivers run up and down my spine. This was what I had prayed for, what I had worked and sweated for, my own little hounds bawling on the trail of a river coon. I don't know why I cried, but I did. While the tears rolled, I whooped again and again. They straightened the trail out and headed down the river. I took off after them as fast as I could. A mile downstream, the coon pulled his first trick. I could tell by my dogs' voices that they had lost the trail. When I came to them, they were out on an old drift sniffing around. The coon had pulled a simple trick. He had run out on the drift, leapt into the water, and crossed over to the other side of the river. To an experienced coon hound, the crude trick would have been nothing at all. But my dogs were just big, awkward pups, trailing their first live coon. I stood and watched, wondering if they would ever remember the training that I had given them. Now and then I would whoop, urging them on. Old Dan was having a fit. He whined and he bawled. He whimpered and cried. He came to me and reared up, begging me to help him. "I'm not going to help you," I scolded, "and you're not going to find him out on that drift. If you would just remember some of the training I gave you, you could find the trail. Now go find that coon." He ran back out on the drift and started searching. Little Ann came up to me. I could see the pleading in her warm gray eyes. "I'm ashamed of you, little girl," I said. "I thought you had more sense than this. If you let him fool you this easy, you'll never be a real coon hound." She whined, turned, trotted downstream to search again for the lost trail. I couldn't understand. Had all that training that I had given them been useless? I knew if I waded the river that they would follow me. Once on the other side, it would be easy for them to find the trail again. I didn't want it that way. I wanted them to figure it out by themselves. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I sat down and buried my face in my arms, feeling like a real failure. Out on the drift, old Dan started whining. It made me angry, and I got up to scold him again. I couldn't understand. Downriver, I looked that way. I could see something swimming for the opposite shore. At first, I thought it was a muskrat. In the middle of the stream, where the moonlight was the brightest, I got a good look. It was little Ann. With a loud whoop, whoop, I told her how proud I was. My little girl had remembered the training. She came out on the gravel bar. She shook the water from her body and disappeared into the thick timbers. Minutes later, she let me know she found the trail again. Before the tones of her voice had died away, old Dan plowed into the water. He was so eager to join her, I could hear him whining as he swam. Couldn't get there fast enough. As soon as his feet touched the bottom in the shallows, he started bawling and lunging. White sheets of water knocked high into the moonlight by his churning feet gleamed like 1,000 tiny white stars in the moonlight. He came out of the river onto a sandbar. In his eagerness, his feet slipped on those loose sands and down he went. He came out of his roll running and bawling. Ahead of him was a log jam. He sailed over it and disappeared down the riverbank. Seconds later, I heard his deep voice blend with the sharp cries of little Anne's. At that moment, no boy in the world could have been more proud of his dogs than I was. Never again would I doubt them. You hear that? He almost gave up. He thought he had failed. He thought they had failed. But little Anne, you know how smart she is. She's on the trail. And so is little Dan, or old Dan, excuse me. I was hurrying along, looking for a shallow riffle so I could wade across, when the voices of my dogs stopped. I waited and I listened. They opened again on my side of the stream. The coon had crossed back over. I couldn't help smiling. I knew that never again would be a ringtail fool that they would have. They could never get away from a swimming across the river trick. The next trick the old fellow pulled was a dandy. He climbed a large water oak standing about 10 feet from the river and simply disappeared. I got there in time to see my dogs swimming. Not finding the trail, they swam back. I stood and watched them. They practically tore the riverbank to pieces looking for that trail. Old Dan knew the coon had climbed the water oak. He went back over to the water oak, reared up on it, and bawled a few times. "There's no use in doing that, boy," I said. "I know he climbed it, but he is not there now. Maybe it's like Grandpa said. He's just climbed right out on through the top and disappeared into the stars." My dogs didn't know it, but I was pretty well convinced that that was going to be what the coon must have done. They wouldn't give up. Once again, they crossed over to the other shore. It was no use. The coon hadn't touched that bank. They came back. Old Dan went up the river and little Anne worked downstream. An hour and a half later, they gave up and came to me begging for help. I knelt down between their little wet bodies while I scratched and petted them. I let them know that I still loved them and was proud. "I'm not mad," I said. "I know you did your best. If that coon can fool both of us, then we're just beat. We'll go someplace else to hunt. He's not the only coon in these bottoms." Just as I picked up my axe and lantern, little Anne let out a bawl and tore out down the riverbank. Old Dan, with a bewildered look on his face, stood for a moment looking after her. Then, raising his head high in the air, he made my eardrums ring with his deep voice. "Whoo!" I could hear the underbrush popping as he ran to join her. I couldn't figure out what had taken place. Surely little Anne had heard or seen something. I could tell by their voices that whatever it was that whatever they were after, they were close enough to see it and were probably running by sight. The animal left the bottoms and headed for the mountains. Whatever it was, I must have realized my dogs were crowding it too close. At the edge of the foothills, it turned and came back toward the river. I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I realized that on striking the river, the animal had again turned and was coming straight toward me. I set my lantern down and tightened my grip on my axe. I was standing my ground quite well when vision my mind. I jumped behind a big sycamore and was trying hard to... I'm going to wait until it comes back. I jumped behind a big sycamore and was trying hard to press my body into the tree when a big coon came tearing by. 25 yards behind him came my dogs, running side by side. I saw them clearly when they passed me, bawling every time their feet touched the ground. After seeing that, there was nothing to be scared of. Once again, I was the fearless hunter, screaming and yelling as loud as I could. "Get him, boy! Get him!" I tore out after him. The trail I knew so well were forgotten. I took off straight through the brush. I was tearing my way through some elders when the voices of my dogs stopped. Holding my breath, I stood and waited. Then it came, the long, drawn-out bawl of the tree bark. My little hounds had done it. They had treed their first coon. When I came to them and saw what they had done, I was speechless. I groaned and closed my eyes. I didn't want to believe it. There were a lot of big sycamores in the bottoms, but the one in which my dogs had treed was the giant sycamore of them all. While prowling the woods, I had seen the big tree many times. I had always stopped and admired it. Like a king in his own domain, it towered far above the other trees. It had taken me quite a while to find a name suitable for this big sycamore. For a while, I had called it the chicken tree. In some ways, it had reminded me of a mother hen hovering over her young in a rainstorm. Its huge limbs spread out over the small birch, ash, box elder, and the water oak, as if alone was their protector. Next, I decided to name it the Giant. That name didn't last long. Mama told us children a story about a big giant that lived up in the mountains and ate little children that were lost. Right away, I started looking for another name. I found the perfect name. From that day on, it was called the Big Tree. I named the bottoms around it the Big Tree Bottoms. Walking around it and using the moon as light, I started looking for the coon. High up in the top, I saw a hollow in the end of a broken limb. I figured that it was the coon's den. I could almost climb any tree I had ever seen, but I knew I could never climb the big sycamore, and it would take days to chop it down. There had been very little hope from the very beginning, but on seeing the hollow, I gave up. Come on, I said to my dogs. There's nothing I can do. We'll go someplace else and find another coon. I turned to walk away. My hounds made no move to follow. They started whining. Old Dan reared up, placed his front paws on the trunk, and started bawling up at that coon. I know he's there, I said, but there's nothing I can do. I can't climb it. Why, it's 60 feet up to the first limb, and it would take me a month to cut that down. Again, I turned and started walking out of the way. Little Ann came up to me. She reared up and started licking my hands, swallowing the knot in my throat. I said, I'm sorry, little girl. I want him just as badly as you do, but there's no way I can get him. She ran back to the tree and started digging in the soft ground close to the roots. I looked up and saw a smile on his face. Oh, hold on. I missed a page. Ever do that? Come on now, I said in a gruff voice. You're both acting silly. You know I'd get the coon for you if I could, but With a whipped dog look on her face and with her tail between her legs, little Ann came over. She wouldn't even look at me. Old Dan walked slowly around behind the tree and hid himself. He peeped around the big trunk and looked at me. The message I read in his friendly eyes tore at my heart. He seemed to be saying, you told us to put one in a tree and you would do the rest. With tears in my eyes, I looked again at the big sycamore. A wave of anger came. I don't care how big you are. I'm not going to let my dogs down. I told them if they put a coon in a tree, I would do the rest, and I'm going to. I'm going to cut you down. I don't care if it takes me a whole year. I walked over and sank my axe as deep as I could into that smooth white bark. My dogs threw a fit. Little Ann started turning in circles. I could hear her pleased whimpering cry. Old Dan bawled and started gnawing on the big tree trunk like he was going to help cut it down. At first, it was easy. My axe was sharp and the chips flew. 2 hours later, 2 hours later. 2 hours later, things were different. My arms felt like two dead grapevines, and my back felt like someone had pulled a plug out of one end of it and drained all the sap out. While taking a breather, I saw I was making more progress than I thought I would. The cut I had started was a foot deep, but I still had a long way to go. This was the big tree. Sitting on their rears, my dogs waited and watched. I smiled at the looks on their faces. Every time I stopped chopping, they would come over. While little Ann washed the sweat from my face, old Dan would inspect my work. He seemed to be pleased with what he saw, for he always wagged his tail. Along about daylight. Along about daylight. That means he's been up all night long. Along about daylight, I got my second wind, and I really did make the chips fly. This burst of energy cost me dearly. By sunup, I was so stiff I could hardly move. My hands and arms were numb. My back screamed with pain. I could go no further. Sitting down, I leaned back against the big tree and fell asleep. Little Ann woke me up by washing my face. I groaned with the torture of getting to my feet. Every muscle in my body seemed to be tied up in a knot. I was thinking of going down to the river to wash my face in the cool water when I heard a loud whoop. I recognized it was my father's voice. I whooped to let him know where I was. Whoop! Papa was riding our red mule. After he rode up, he just sat. I saw the worry leave his face. Papa was riding around on his red mule. After he rode up, he just sat there and looked me over. He glanced at my dogs and at the big sycamore. I saw the worry leave his face. He straightened his shoulders, pursed his lips, and blew out a little air. He reminded me of someone who had just dropped a heavy load. In a slow, calm voice, he asked, "Are you all right, Billy?" "Yes, Papa," I said. "Oh, I'm a little tired and sleepy. Otherwise, I'm fine." He slid from the mule's back and came over. "Your mother's worried," he said. "When you didn't come in, we didn't know what had happened. You should have come home." I didn't know what to say. I bowed my head and looked at the ground. I was trying hard to choke back the tears when I felt his hand on my shoulder. "I'm not scolding you," he said. "We just thought maybe you had an accident or something." I looked up and saw a smile on his face. He turned and looked again at the tree. "Say," he said, "this is the sycamore you call the big tree, isn't it?" I nodded my head. "Is there a coon up there?" he asked. "There sure is, Papa," I said. "He's in that hollow limb. See, that one way up there? That's why I couldn't come home. I was afraid he was going to get away." "Maybe you just think he's there," Papa said. "I believe I'd make sure before I'd cut a tree this big down." "Oh, he's there all right," I said. "My dogs weren't 10 feet behind him when he went up it." "Why are you so determined to get this coon?" Papa asked. "Couldn't you go somewhere else and tree another one? Maybe the tree would be smaller." "I thought about that, Papa," I said, "but I made a promise to my pups. I told them that if they would put one up in a tree, that I would do the rest. Well, they fulfilled their part of the bargain. Now it's up to me to do my part. And I'm going. I'm going to, Papa. I'm going to cut it down. I don't care if it takes me a whole year." Papa laughed and said, "Oh, I don't think it'll take that long, but it will take a while. I'll tell you what I'll do. You take the mule and you go get some breakfast. I'll chop on it until you get back." You see, if someone helps me get in the way, he's not going to let anybody dismiss the opportunity and keep his promise to his dogs. An astonished look came over my father's face. "Why, Billy," he said, "you can't stay down here without anything to eat and no sleep. Besides, it'll take at least 2 days to cut that tree down, and that's hard work. Please, Papa," I begged, "don't make me quit. I just have to get that coon. If I don't, my dogs won't ever believe in me again." Papa didn't know what to tell me. He scratched his head, looked over at my dogs and back at me. He started walking around. I waited him to make up his mind. He finally reached a decision. "All right," he said. "If that's the way you want it, I'm for it, even if it's only an agreement between you and your dogs. If a man's word isn't any good, he's no good to himself." Do you hear that? If a man's word isn't any good, he's no good himself. This is where you got to be able to promise deep inside yourself. See that? This is called integrity. That's the fancy word for it. Integrity. Now, I got to get back and tell your mother that you're all right. It's a cinch that you can't do that kind of work on an empty stomach. So I'll send your oldest sister down with a lunch bucket for you. With tears in my eyes, I said, "Tell Mama I'm real sorry for not coming home last night. I didn't mean to not come home." "Don't you worry about your mother," he said, as he climbed on the mule's back. "I'll take care of her. Another thing, I have to make a trip to the store today, and I'll talk this over with your grandfather. He may be able to help somewhere." After Papa left, things were a lot different. The tree didn't look as big, and my axe wasn't as heavy. I even managed to sing a little song as I chopped away. When my sister came with the lunch bucket, I could have kissed her, but I didn't. She took one look at the big tree, and her blue eyes got as big as a guinea's egg. "Why, it'll take a whole month for you to cut that tree down, and all for an old little coon." I was so busy with the fresh side pork, fried eggs, and hot biscuits from Mama, I didn't pay much attention to her. After all, she was a girl, and girls don't think like boys do. Pause. This is an older book, and I want to ask you a question. Do some girls think like boys do? Yeah. Do some boys think like girls do? Yeah. This is just him trying to be a man, trying to think that he knows more than she does. And that's just the way it is. So you got to give him the cred. You got to give him what he has. She raved on. "You can't possibly cut that down today. And what are you going to do when it gets dark?" "I'm going to keep right on chopping," I said. "I stayed with it last night, didn't I? Well, I'll stay with it till it's cut down. I don't care how long it takes." My sister got upset. She looked at me, threw back her small head. and looked up to the top of the big sycamore. "You're as crazy as a bedbug," she said. "Why, I never heard of such a thing." She stepped over in front of me and very seriously asked if she could look in my eyes. "Look in my eyes," I said. "What do you want to do that for? I'm not sick." "Yes, you are, Billy," she said. "You're real sick. Mama said when old man Johnson went crazy, his eyes turned green. I want to see if yours are green." This was too much. "If you don't get out of here," I shouted, "you're going to be red instead of green. I mean that." I grabbed up a stick and started toward her. Of course, I wouldn't have hit her for anything. This scared her, and she started for the house. I heard her saying something about an old coon as she disappeared in the underbrush. Down in the bottom of my lunch bucket, I found a little package of scraps for my dogs. While they were eating, I walked down to a little spring and filled the bucket with cool water. The food did wonders for me. My strength came back. I spit on my hands, and whistling a coon hunter's tune, I started making the chips fly. The cut grew so big, I could have laid down in it. Taking a rest, old Dan came over to inspect my work. He hopped up in the tree, cut, and sniffed around. "You better get out of there," I said. "If that tree takes a notion to fall, it'll mash you flatter than a tadpole's tail." With a no-care look on his friendly face, he gave me a hurry-up signal with a wag of his tail. Little Ann had dug a bed in a pile of dead leaves. She looked as if she were asleep, but I knew she wasn't. Every time I stopped swinging the axe, she'd raise her head and look at me. Whoo-wee. Ladies and gentlemen, that was chapter 8. I know that we had some technical difficulties. I promised to take a look at it before I post it for anybody else. I want to thank the 7 people who have been here since the beginning. I know that there were a few more, and I'm sure they got a little frustrated at the choppiness of today. I promise that if it's too choppy, I'll read it again for you. But now we have a big tree. We have a young man, who has a promise to 2 dogs. And he's going to chop that tree down no matter how big it is to keep his word, to keep his part of the bargain. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday, and that means that we won't read until 3:30 Georgia time on Monday. So what I want you to do is I want you to have the greatest weekend in the world. I want you to go out and celebrate springtime. I want you to go out and do something amazing. Go out and explore and find something brand new that you've never seen before. Maybe take a little time and listen to the woods around you or listen to the land around you and see if you can pick up on some of those things that Billy was able to hear when it was all super quiet. I hope, beyond hope, that you stay safe over the weekend. Send me anything that you do for verbal to visual. Send me anything that you might be doing. And finally, remember, try to set up a nice, comfortable place for you to read your own book. Make sure that you have another book going on that you're reading and get good at it. Read out loud and fix it. Read it again. Get better at it. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say from me and my heart and my family, stay safe, be good, bring it on, and have a great, great, great weekend. Get out of here.